Dayton, Ohio. 4:40 in the morning, the second Saturday of July, 1962. Walter Pruitt, 38, stood in the driveway with the tailgate of his Ford Country Squire down, 3 suitcases already on the wet grass beside it, and the porch light, the only light on the street. Route 25 south to Daytona Beach was 11 hours away. Carol had told him the night before that if they weren't clear of the Smoky Mountain grades by early afternoon, the heat would sit on the kids in that back seat like a hand. What Walter did not know yet, standing there in the dark with the trunk light throwing his shadow across the lawn, was that the order he was about to load these suitcases, in the order his own father had taught him on a gravel driveway outside Springfield in 1948, was not habit. It was engineering. He would remember this exact 15 minutes for the rest of his life, and not because anything went wrong. The porch light buzzed faintly with the moths already working it. Somewhere 2 blocks over a milk truck idled. Carol came out with the cooler last, the way she always did, and set it down at his feet without a word, because they both already knew where it went. He had never once written the order down. He had never needed to. 4 suitcases, 2 coolers, a rolled tent they'd never used and would never leave behind, a roof rack rated for less than what he was about to ask of it. Which one went in first, and why? After 12 summers of doing this exact thing in this exact driveway, did the answer still matter this much? Before you can understand why the order mattered, you need to understand what the Country Squire actually was. Not a car with extra trunk space, but a specific American answer to a specific American problem. How do you fit a family, its luggage, its food, and 11 hours of contingency into one machine and still stop it on a mountain grade in July? Ford built the Country Squire from 1950 to 1991, 41 years, one of the longest continuous nameplates the company ever ran. The wood on the earliest models was real. By 1962, it was a printed decal called Dynock, glued and grained to look like ash and mahogany, because real wood swelled and cracked in weather, and nobody wanted to refinish a station wagon every spring. The lie was better than the truth. Nobody complained. The wagon could seat 9 with the 3rd row folded up, facing backward, a detail that mattered to no regulation in 1962, because there was no regulation yet that cared. Lap belts weren't standard equipment until 1964. The wagon that Walter Pruitt loaded that morning was, by the letter of the law, 2 years later, not legal to sell. What it could carry mattered more to a family like his than what it could protect them from. Some Country Squires came with air-assisted rear suspension, an option, not standard, and worth the extra money to anyone who had ever watched a fully loaded wagon's back end sag low enough to scrape a driveway apron. The roof rack held what the tailgate couldn't. The order Walter had learned wasn't superstition. It was the difference between a wagon that rode level to Kentucky and one that didn't. Before we continue, if this kind of documentation is what you have been looking for, consider subscribing. Every video on this channel goes into one specific element of the American summer road trip between 1940 and 1980. The station wagon, loaded before dawn, the TripTik on the dashboard, the traffic jam with no information, the gas line in 1974, and what each of these things required of the family inside the car. Not nostalgia for chrome and open highways. The documented experience of a summer road when the trip itself started in a driveway in the dark, and some families packed a TripTik in the glove box, while others packed the Green Book. What Walter Pruitt had, instead of a car that measures its own cargo balance, was an order his father taught him on a gravel driveway in 1948, and it asked more of a 1962 family than a minivan with captain's chairs ever asked of anyone again. If you took these trips, or your parents did, put it in the comments. What was the order in your family, and who taught it to you? A future video follows what happened on the grade outside Corbin, Kentucky, when 3 wagons loaded that same summer met a slow coal truck none of them could pass back to the driveway. So the wagon could carry 9 people and everything they thought they'd need. It could not, on its own, decide what order any of it went in. That decision belonged to the family, and for 2 families leaving Ohio on the same road that same July, it meant 2 entirely different things. The Smithsonian holds a 1,955 country squire that belonged to a Southern California family, donated with its history intact. The record of what filled that cargo bay on an ordinary outing reads like an inventory of American childhood: picnic baskets, rubber rafts, beach towels, a couple of tricycles, the family dog riding loose in the back. On vacation, the same space became a playpen for children too young to sit still for 11 hours. That is not this family's car. But it is the same country, the same decade, the same species of wagon, and it tells you the cargo bay was never neutral space. It was a room, and someone had to decide what went where in it. Walter's order went like this: suitcases first, laid flat, hard sides down, because soft sides shifted and hard sides made a floor. The spare tire wedged against the wheel well where it wouldn't roll. The tent, unused, unremovable, jammed along the driver's side to square off the load. Then the roof rack, the folding chairs, the beach umbrella, anything that could get wet and not matter. The cooler went in dead last, standing upright against the tailgate because it was the only thing anyone would need again before Kentucky. You could hear the ritual before you could see it, the specific hollow thunk of a hard-sided suitcase dropped onto a wagon floor, then the softer give of the tent bag. Then metal scraping metal as the roof rack straps went taut. Carol checked the latch on the cooler twice. She always checked it twice. What had 30 years of station wagon summers organized in a family that a rented U-Haul trailer never could? And what happened to a family's order the one summer somebody forgot it? 3 kids in the back seat, no air conditioning, no seatbelt requirement until 1964, and 11 hours ahead of them. The station wagon wasn't just a vehicle. For the length of the drive, it was the entire livable world the Pruitt children had. The way back, the flattened cargo space behind the second-row seat doubled as a nap spot, a card table, a boxing ring for the inevitable fight over the window. Whatever the car couldn't carry outside itself, the family carried inside itself for 11 hours, with the windows down and the vinyl seats already hot by 7. Before you can understand what that packing order looked like for a different Ohio family on that same road that same week, you need to understand what pre-dawn departure meant when the destination itself was uncertain in a way the TripTik never had to account for. 2 hours north, in Cleveland, James Avery loaded his own station wagon that same July, and the order he used bore almost no resemblance to Walter Pruitt's. James and his wife Ruth were headed for American Beach, Florida, a stretch of Atlantic shoreline that Black Americans had owned and operated since the 1930s. Because most of the beaches between Ohio and there would not let his children onto the sand. He left at 3 in the morning, not 4:40. Documented practice for Black families traveling this era's highways. Leave before dawn to bank as many daylight hours as possible, because daylight, not distance, decided which towns you could safely pass through. The cooler went in first for James Avery, not last, first, at the bottom of everything, because it held 3 days of food his family would eat inside the car: fried chicken, hard-boiled eggs, biscuits wrapped in wax paper, packed not for convenience, but because there was no guarantee that any restaurant along Route 25 would open its front door to them. 2 families, same road, same morning darkness. The order each one used for the exact same object told you, before either car left the driveway, which highway each family was actually about to drive. Walter's TripTik came from the AAA branch on Main Street, where an agent had sat with him for 20 minutes in June, unspooling strip maps and marking the route in green highlighter, noting the motels, the scenic overlooks, the recommended lunch stops. It told him where to eat. It never occurred to it to ask whether he'd be allowed to. James Avery's Green Book came from a Cleveland barbershop, passed along the way. Most copies were by word of mouth, from someone who'd already made the drive. It didn't have overlooks. It had addresses, which filling stations on Route 25 would sell to him, which diners had a colored entrance around back, which towns had none of either and needed to be crossed without stopping at all. You are Ruth Avery at the kitchen table the night before, a pencil in one hand and the Green Book open to Kentucky and Tennessee. You're not planning where to see. You're planning where it's safe to need something. Period documentation of this era's black travel shoebox lunches, gas cans carried in the trunk. Something brought along for the children, in case no restroom would open its door, describes a packing list built entirely around the assumption that the highway would not help you if something went wrong. Walter Pruitt's order made a trip more comfortable. James Avery's order made a trip possible at all. Both wagons pulled onto Route 25 within a few hours of each other, carrying almost the same objects: coolers, suitcases, children. Neither family had misread the road. They had read two different roads occupying the same asphalt at the same hour in the same summer. Ask anyone who lived it, and they won't describe the highway first. They'll describe the smell of a station wagon's vinyl interior after it sat closed all night in July heat, that specific warm rubber and dust smell that hit you the second the tailgate opened, before a single suitcase went in. They'll describe the particular hollow sound of a car door in the dark, louder than it had any right to be, with the whole street asleep. The packing itself was never really about packing. It was the last quiet the family would get before 11 hours of noise, the license plate game, the fighting over the window, the "are we there yet?" that started somewhere around the second hour and never fully stopped. Whatever a father and mother said to each other in that driveway, low-voiced, checking the latch one more time, was the last conversation of the day that belonged only to them. For the Averys, that same quiet held something heavier, and it held it without ever being spoken aloud in front of the children. Ruth didn't tell her kids why the cooler went in first. She didn't tell them why they were leaving at 3 instead of 5. She let the order do the explaining. Her voice never had to. That's the thing about a packing ritual nobody ever wrote down. It taught the next generation everything it needed to know without teaching them anything they'd have to carry as a burden. Yet, the suitcase order was Walter's inheritance to give his kids. The Averys' order was something else entirely, a form of protection disguised as a habit, so thorough that a child could grow up inside it for years before understanding what it had actually been protecting them from. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 changed what the law required of every restaurant and motel on Route 25. It did not change the order in the Avery driveway that same summer or the next one. Habits built for survival don't dissolve the day a law passes. The final edition of the Green Book came out in 1966, and even its own closing pages acknowledged that the guide's job, the actual, practical, block-by-block job, wasn't finished the way the cover implied. The station wagon itself didn't last much past 1,980. The minivan arrived forward-facing seats for everyone, no way back to fight over, no back of the wagon playpen. By the early 2000s, some of those minivans had a screen built into the headrest, and a child could ride 11 hours without once asking a parent what state they were in. The roof rack, the folding chairs, the argument about what fit Rubbermaid made a rooftop cargo box that solved the argument by removing it. Nobody teaches a packing order anymore because rolling suitcases and a cargo box don't require one. What disappeared with the order wasn't just a habit. It was the 15 minutes that made a family briefly a small, unspoken operation. A father who knew where the spare tire went without thinking. A mother who checked a latch twice because checking it once had never once been enough. In a driveway, in the dark, in a summer that both of these Ohio families would spend the rest of their lives being able to describe down to the smell of the vinyl. If this channel is going to keep documenting what the American summer road trip was and what it required of the people inside the car, subscribe. There are more driveways at dawn, more TripTiks marked in green highlighter, more green books passed hand to hand in a barbershop, more of what a family carried that never showed up on any packing list. What Walter Pruitt had instead of a car that tracks its own cargo weight was a memorized order, taught once, on a gravel driveway in 1948, and it asked something of a family in 1962 that no minivan with a screen in the headrest has ever had to ask again. And if your family had an order away the trunk always got packed, a rule nobody explained until you were old enough to need it, put it in the comments. What was it, and who taught it to you? A future video follows what happened outside Corbin, Kentucky, when 3 wagons loaded that same July met a slow coal truck. None of them could pass on the grade. Walter Pruitt closed the tailgate at 5:11 that morning, 11 minutes behind his own schedule. Carol counted the suitcases twice, out of habit, though she already knew the count. The cooler stood upright against the glass, right where it always went, last. 2 hours north, James Avery had already been on Route 25 for close to 2 hours. He'd left at 3, not for the traffic, but for the daylight. Every mile of it mattered on this road in 1962, in a way it never had to for the family behind them in the country squire. His cooler had gone in first, at the very bottom, under everything else, packed with 3 days of food that was never going to be bought from a window at the front of a building. Both wagons reached the Florida coast within a day of each other that July. Neither family has ever called what they loaded into the car that morning luggage. Walter Pruitt called it the order. James Avery called it the plan. They were 2 words for 2 different mornings, on the same road, in the same dark.